Hello and welcome back to the Avoid the Tyrewall podcast. Today I'm joined by special guest Tom Gaymor. Tom, do you want to tell us a bit about yourself?
Yes, so I am a former racing driver. Many moons ago, I might look young, but I'm very much not young now, at 42 years of age. So I started off with a steering wheel between my hands, and I swapped that for a microphone. Really fortunate to still be working in the sport as a broadcaster, and that is what sort of connected us. But I think we're going to talk about absolutely everything, aren't we? My racing and broadcasting.
Hopefully. So how did you discover your passion for motorsports?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So, motorsport, when I was younger, we didn't have the social media world, the digital world that connects so many young fans nowadays. So, it was a little bit more exclusive. And if you didn't have a sort of a family or really close friends who were involved in the sport, or whether or not that's as a fan base or working within the sport, it was quite difficult to really get to digest the information and to know how you can get involved, whether or not it's watching or being in the sport. You had to kind of wait for Thursday morning and Autosport magazine to be distributed around all the newsagents or wherever you shopped to get that. And so I got involved with the sport really late. My granddad was a doctor, predominantly in the rugby world. So I grew up around rugby and cricket. He did do some medical support work around a motorsport team, namely a chap called David Price, who's no longer with us, but he did some wonderful work within the world of Formula One and Le Mans. And I remember going to his workshop at the age of 11 or 12, thinking this is much better than rugby and cricket, and this is where I want to be. I don't know what I want to do, but I've been karting from a young age, but that was the arrive and drive, the birthdays, that kind of thing. In-kart club is a million miles away from ever thinking that you're going to be involved in the sport or knowing what happened after karting, what the bridge was into car racing and Formula One. So I almost didn't really have that dream because it was not something that I felt was obtainable. And then having this connection with David Price and being introduced to the sort of professional side of the sport at 11 was the catalyst to trying to drive forward that dream, and actually having that dream and starting to read karting magazine and look at what the sport was about, and getting more involved in trying to do more in the karting space, which, as we know, is very expensive. So my parents didn't share the passion and enthusiasm that I had. And we didn't have the finances to do it. I was very lucky. I went to a great school, but going to a great school and actually having free income to spend on motorsport, two very different things. So it wasn't until I was about 15, 16, 17 that I got my first big opportunity, and that was moving to France with La Filière.
Very nice. So, you mentioned that you were a racing driver. Like, did you compete in any well-known championships? Like, which ones did you like compete in?
Yeah, so my first big break was being at La Filière. So moving to France as a teenager, racing in what is known now as French Formula 4. So back then it was Renault Campus. So very much the same, single-seater base car, looks like a Formula 4 car, and the likes of Alexandre Premat, Olivier Pla, Wesley Barber, Adam Carroll, those were all contemporaries around my sort of age group. Lars Sexton, who was a Super One karter, and yeah, going to France with very limited experience. I didn't have any two-stroke experience. I never really competed in any British championships, but here I was in France on a fully paid scholarship. To get to La Filière, you had to enter a competition at Silverstone, and all the top karters entered that, and then you were chosen to represent the UK in this sort of French Formula Renault Championship, if you like. And that was my first real experience into A, seeing if I could do it, and B, my journey, and I had quite a bit of success in my first year. You know, I started the first two races at Le Mans, finishing second, and then we went to Nogaro Po. I qualified on pole at Po, won at Po, which is one of the best street circuits in my opinion, in not only in France but in Europe, and more podiums and successes. Missed a weekend because I crashed and damaged the car. That really hindered me in the championship, but I still finished in the top 5, 6 in the championship. And then it was a real problem for my parents because I was actually quite good. So, so then, so then they were like, well, we can't, we can't not do anything now. And the rush and panic and work began to try and formulate some contacts, some management, some partners, some people that could bring money to the table to try and help my career, and we managed to do that. And I came back to the UK and signed with Hayward Racing in Formula Ford when Formula Ford was massive back in the UK. And Hayward, the Factory McGow squad, they ran with Anthony Davidson, Jenson Button, Chiesa, some huge names. Probably, I could list more, but you'll, I'll be showing my age then. And racing back in the UK and Formula Ford was incredible. I had Clivio Pizzioni as my teammate, Ruben Carapatoso. So Pizzioni had just come second to Lewis Hamilton in the World Championships karting. Ruben Carapatoso was a Formula A world champion, so he'd beaten some of the biggest names in the sport in terms of winning that world championship. So to have them as teammates and to be racing in the UK in one of the biggest junior categories in the world at that time was a baptism of fire, but a wonderful experience nevertheless.
Yeah, you mentioned Formula Ford. Why do you think it's like gone down in popularity? Because like now it's only really like a support series to like British GT or like GB3 or something.
You know what? It's a good question. I think that the sport has changed. European karting grew and grew, and then the fascination with racing cars in Europe grew and grew and grew with the introduction of Formula Renault and the national championships and the Euro Cup and that kind of thing. And Formula Ford, I always say motorsport in the junior categories is like high street fashion, and things come and go. And unfortunately, that sort of Renault push into the space hoovered up a lot of the talent, and along along with that, the demise of Formula Ford. So a lot of the young drivers, instead of looking at racing in Formula Ford with the top teams, those top teams had to change to Formula Renault, and then a lot of the drivers were looking at European championships. You had the Euro Series with F3 predominantly. Before that, you'd had British F3 and German F3. Formula Ford was a feeder to British F3, but with British F3 on the demise and people looking at the Euro Series, people just wanted to race in Europe, and the national championships sort of fell by the wayside in terms of their popularity, which I think is a huge shame because you learn so much on the national platforms. The circuits are brilliant. We've got some of the best circuits in the world in the UK. And also you get lots of time, in terms of testing and that kind of stuff. So I'd love to see it return one day, but I don't think I won't be holding my breath.
There also seems to be a new junior category appearing like every so often. Like we had Euro Cup 3, we've had GB4.
I can't keep up.
No, honestly. Um, so obviously you've moved over to commentating and broadcasting. Can you talk us through some of the differences between series you commentate on? Like, for example, are they remote or are they at the track?
Yeah, really good question. So I've been fortunate enough now to be a part of some of the biggest events globally. When I first started off this journey, I never thought I would be where I am now in terms of having worked on Formula One, obviously Indycar, Le Mans, worked across the Monaco Grand Prix weekend, the Indy 500, Le Mans, the 24, the 24 hour. So to have been a part of those events is really special, and it's all down to the broadcaster, the budget, the championship, and whether or not doing a wraparound program, or you're providing the world feed as to whether or not you're on site or whether or not you are in studios. We've seen more and more post COVID, with the introduction of technology and the push to minimize the carbon footprint and to get to net zero, that kind of thing, more broadcasters looking at doing stuff from studios. And we can see, even with Sky Sports F1 this year, that they're doing sort of 5-6 races from the UK as opposed to being on site. And I think motorsport's one of those championships that you can do it, because you're commentating off tube. When you're at the circuit, you can't see where the cars go. They disappear out of view and come back every couple of minutes. And you have to commentate on the pictures that the audience see back at home. It's not like being at a football match or a cricket match or a rugby match where you can just look up and see everything in the stadium. So motorsport is a championship where you can do things off tube, and actually it works. It works very, very well. So I don't always miss the travel, but I do miss that camaraderie that you get in the paddock sometimes. That sense of the traveling circus and everyone being together, and the small talk. But even now with technology, when you're at a track, it's WhatsApp voice notes that you will send relentlessly to drivers, whether or not you're at the track or back in London. Because even if you're at the track, at Silverstone, for example, at Grand Prix weekend, you have to catch a bus to go halfway around the track. And actually, we get lazy. So I'm not going to go searching for drivers. I'm just going to send them a WhatsApp voice note, and they can get back to me in their own time.
Yeah, I mean, I used to do commentary. We'd like have the Sky Sports feed up, and then we'd have that on mute and broadcast it on YouTube.
Oh, I love that.
And yeah, I don't think I was stunning because I hadn't done it before, but yeah, that was like really, I think, showed me a difference, because I do interviews at the track, and there's just so much going on, but like at home it's like calm, you're just watching the race cars go by. But yeah, I think
Yeah, it's different environment. You have to get into it. There's no two ways about that, because you do feel a little bit detached. But yeah, there's no substitute for being on events in terms of connecting with people, definitely.
definitely, like the first interview I did, I think I'd messaged him on like at a track. I messaged him on Instagram and was like, "Hi, can I please do an interview?" And I hadn't got like microphones or anything, so I just like rocked up with my phone. Do you think there's been like a rise in fans of IndyCar in the UK?
Yeah, unequivocally. I think we've created a wonderful audience using the Sky IndyCar hashtag. I love how inclusive the audience is, and how everybody's there to ask questions if they don't know, and people step in and help answer. There's no judgment or criticism or lack of inclusion. It's which you can get in the social media space. People are so keen to judge others and to belittle others, but we don't seem to have that with the Sky IndyCar hashtag. And obviously, being on Sky Sports F1 is a wonderful platform in terms of piggybacking off of the Formula One audience with the time frames that we operate within. So often, if you're racing in the European time zone and we have IndyCar coming off afterwards, we've had so many crossover from Formula One, and enjoy the IndyCar as well. So the audience has definitely grown. The numbers are fantastic, and long may that continue. And it's just a real pleasure to be a part of that. I've really enjoyed trying to drive the coverage, and I do that with a chap called Neil Wooding, who is the producer at Sky Sports F1, who goes above and beyond with IndyCar. And with the blessing of the boss Billy, it's been really exciting, the journey that we've been on over the last few years.
Definitely. And like I've started getting into IndyCar more, and I think you see a shift in the fans, because I think F1 fans are a bit like, I don't know what's the word, like they think F1 is the greatest thing to ever exist. And I like F1, but I think, F2, F3, IndyCar are so much better. And all the fans in IndyCar are nice. And then like the F1 fans are a bit stagnant. Is that a word?
Yeah, I think you're right. And also, drivers, fans have their favorite drivers, and you might say something that is objective. It might not even be subjective. But if you are talking about one driver who's made a mistake or whatever it is, you come under a bit of fire from their fan base, and that can be quite challenging. Whereas actually in IndyCar, everyone has that sort of nourishing conversation because it's not really polarized views. It's not for or against. People just sort of join in and have that nice conversation in the middle.
Yeah, definitely. The guy I used to do commentary with, he's a New Garden fan and I'm an Award fan. And obviously, we know what happened this year, but we like have a bit of banter about it. But I feel like in F1, that would have been like people thought you were taking shots at the other person. But like, I love the respect that everyone has in Indy. It's so much
And I
better.
think it comes from the championship as well. And actually, Formula One is good at this, and Drive to Survive's great. But the camaraderie within the paddock in IndyCar is fantastic, and the drivers do really respect each other, do get on, and do have some tongue in cheek conversations, and that sometimes spills out onto social media as well. The sort of Scotty Mack and Tony Kanaan spat off of
That was
the
funny.
driver. And it's all tongue in cheek, and I think the fans enjoy that and get on the back of it.
Definitely. But obviously, IndyCar's America based, and Canada as well. But given that some of the races are on pretty late for us English folk, how does that affect your race preparation?
Yeah, I mean, crikey, looking at this weekend, I'm on at 1 in the morning. Um, so because we do more and more from the studio, actually, with the international championships, when you're doing China, Australia, I did the Olympics during COVID from China, from Japan, and that was 2 weeks of night shifts. You get used to doing things, so it feels like Le Mans every single weekend when it's really difficult. But actually, because of the NBC time slots and running before the NASCAR, we've been lucky where the races actually haven't been that late. But now we've got the evening race, Iowa time, which will be middle of the night here. It does get a bit tiring at times. Sponsored by coffee, and also trying to hide the delirium. So wandering through whatever it is you're saying, and being tired and forgetting words and mumbling and that kind of stuff. You've got to be on the ball, and you've got to stay sharp, and you've got to really switch on when you're on air. So that side of things is really important because the audience deserve that. You have to be on the money, and so that's the hardest bit is really hiding that tiredness, and being really sharp and enthusiastic.
The best part about Le Mans is in the middle of the night when the commentators just go insane and they just start like
Yeah,
they just talk crap. It's so
yeah.
funny.
Yeah, but I think because everybody is on that journey as well at home, I think that works really well because everyone's just feeling that fight. You're in your own race to get to the end, really.
Definitely. What is something about motorsports commentary that most people do not know, but you think that they should know?
I think the hardest bit is the multitasking. When you're at home and you spot something that the commentator hasn't spotted, you may be just fixating on that one bit of information. Whereas as a commentator, you've got so much going on. And that's not just the screens in front of you, that's negotiating the channel, the fresh restarts, the edit points, the breaks, absolutely everything else that's going on, different audiences coming in. So you've got a huge amount of information coming through your ears, and you've got to be able to digest that. So I came on air 20 minutes early the other weekend, for example, at Sky with the IndyCar. NBC changed their plans. I'm on air, but I'm having to listen to what is going on, that NBC have changed their plans, when they're coming in, how we're going to do it. That whole conversation that's going on, I'm listening to that whilst trying to broadcast, whilst trying to look at everything. and I have to take that in and I have to react to that. So there's so much going on, and a lot of the time when you have the studio guests for the Indy 500 and stuff like that, they won't have that in their ears, because if they did, they'd just pause. As soon as people start talking in your ears, you just stop. And so there's a lot of multitasking, a lot of information coming into you that you've got to digest and react to. And I think that's the hardest part of what we do, being able to listen to stuff and listen to your co-commentator or your guests and see what's going on and look at the timing screens and look at everything else that's going on. And I think that sort of chaotic nature of the environment, obviously at home, you're not aware of.
Definitely. I mean, when I'm like talking to my mum and watching TikTok, I'm talking about one thing and obviously I'm watching it and I'll start saying what's in the video, or like when I'm listening to music and I'm writing, I'll start writing the lyrics. So I'd be like stressing.
Yeah, it is interesting, and it takes, no one's good at it when they start. So you just have to learn, and you have to learn to not listen but listen, and you do that by picking out words that you want to act on, that kind of stuff. So you learn to have a technique, and you learn to sort of navigate what's going on, all the while being live on TV with people saying all kinds of lovely things on social media if you don't quite get it right.
Um, Out of everything you've commentated, what is your favorite to commentate on?
I have to say the Indy 500. Um, and that, I've been fortunate enough to do the Monaco Grand Prix weekend for F1 TV to do Le Mans. And it's so close between those blue ribbon events. I mean, I used to live in Le Mans. I absolutely love Le Mans. I love everything about that whole weekend. But for me, and this is not for everyone, but the way the Americans do sport just pips it for me. So I love the build up for the Indy 500. I love the ceremony and the not just the national anthem, but the back home to Indiana, and everything that goes on, the drinking of the milk at the end, the traditions. I just think the Indy 500 is very special, and I do think that it's it's a race that's not for everyone in terms of the danger elements and what racing on ovals presents in terms of a risk. So I think it has that ultimate respect from all the drivers around the world, because not everybody would want to put themselves in that space. Turning into turn one at 143 miles an hour and you don't know if the car's going to stick or not. That takes a special type of courage. So huge amount of respect for the people that do it. Absolutely love the way the Americans do sport. They marry entertainment and sport so well. And so being a part of the Indy 500, it's like being in a Hollywood movie every time you do it.
When I remember I first watched my first IndyCar race, I can't remember which one it was, but obviously they do the prayer at the start, and like obviously England do not do that. So in my notebook, because I have a notebook where I write everything that I want to say in my videos, I thought, what the hell is this prayer? Like, what on earth is going on? Because I was just so confused.
And I love how they get the commercials into the prayer as well. We thank the Lord for the Sunoco fuel and the Firestone tires and stuff like that. It's really good. The
Gotta
invocation.
respect, you gotta respect their product placement, honestly.
Yeah.
So we said about the Indy 500, obviously this year it was delayed significantly because I have a job as well, because need to fund my racing. But I thought that I'd missed the 500 because I was supposed to be working right through the middle. And then I'm like scrolling through Twitter and I'm like, rain delay. I'm gonna be able to watch it. I did. Yeah. Anyway, uh, yeah, how did you deal with the delay at this year's 500?
So that's another challenge of being a broadcaster, right? We just talked about the challenges. We had a 6 hour fill for the rain delay, and you just got to be comfortable with the unknown. So you got to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, if that sort of oxymoron sounds right. And don't overthink it. Don't plan for too much. Just be able to react with whatever it is that's happening. You're there as front of house. People like Neil and the whole gallery that are behind the Indy 500 production and the studio, they're there to think about what it is that they're going to do, running replays of last year's race, running replays of qualifying, VT interviews, that kind of stuff. And they will navigate you through what it is that they decide. So not to overthink it, not to try and worry or panic too much about what's going to come next. Trust the people that are around you, trust the gallery, and just react to whichever way they're navigating you. But yeah, 6 hours was a really long film.
Definitely. I don't know if this is like really relevant, but I did my research. So, can you talk to us about your work with the Carlin Academy and the MSA Academy?
Yeah, it's a good point. Now, I would want to do more in this space if I could. TV has taken me a little bit away from it because I've been super busy and my diary doesn't allow for some of the other projects that I've been involved in the past. But I'm fascinated, having come from a performance background, from a competition background. I'm fascinated by people. I'm fascinated by what makes people work in those performance environments. How do you be the best that you can be on the most important days of your life? How do you pass your driving test, for example, without getting too nervous? England this weekend, the penalty takers. What separates the top performers from success and failure? So that's what took me into that space, being able to create a more nourishing and healthy environment for people that are competing in the sport. Because I think we focus too much on the performer, we focus too much on the car, we don't focus enough on the human being, and all of that falls down if the human being's not right, if the human being is fearing failure, if the human being is nervous. It stops you. That emotional reaction stops you from being the best that you can be. So that's what took me there. And I'd love to do more. I still do work in that space. I was doing a mental health talk yesterday with the Metropolitan Police. I love to try and support human beings and help them in that space.
Was it like Trevor Carlin who got you involved with the Carlin Academy, or was it someone
Yeah,
else?
I mean, if Trevor is notorious for being brilliant with young drivers. If you look at his alumni, how he works with young drivers, protecting them from the pressure, wherever that pressure may come, allowing them to flourish and be the best that they can be, and enjoy racing under pressure because it's a pressurized environment. Trevor has been the very best. He's been a stalwart of the junior series for so long. So it was just talking to him. I know Trevor obviously, and it was just talking to him about that connection, about my vision, matching his vision, how we could do it, and coming up with the academy was a wonderful experience. And yeah, do you know what? I don't think the sport's quite ready for it. I think motorsport has work to do compared to other sports, but maybe we're a bit too early with that. But I think, in years to come, because of the work that's being done in that space, there is a real, there's going to be a an opportunity for people to deliver some wonderful work.
Trevor's like really lovely as well. Like I've interviewed him before, and it's just a shame that you don't see him around the paddock anymore because obviously he's not involved with the team due to reasons.
I wonder what his next project will be. Trevor's wonderful. He's just down to earth,
Yeah.
and actually, when you're a young driver, you used to put Trevor on a pedestal because it's like Trevor Carlin, the Carlin brand preceded him, if you like, in terms of how enormous it was and the success that they'd had. But the success that they had was underpinned by the family environment that he created. That when you meet him, you realize that he's just a human being and he just loves motorsport and he just wants to change wheels and win car races and enjoy himself at the same time. And that really does come across whenever you talk to him. Yeah, he's a top man.
Definitely. This could be controversial. What is your opinion on IndyCar moving from NBC to
It's I love the NBC team. So I think Lee Diffie, T-Bell, Hinch, everyone in the pits, Georgia Hennebury, Marty Schneider, everybody, they do a great job, and it's hard as a broadcaster to see them not being involved. And I know how that feels myself when you've lost gigs and gigs have gone elsewhere. But in terms of the sport and growing the sport and the reach that Fox has and the platform that Fox will provide with every race being live on Fox, I think it's a huge opportunity for the sport. I think it's going to put IndyCar right back in the shop window with its reach. So commercially is a very, very strong deal for IndyCar.
Well, I just think that the team not yeah, at NBC, they all just gel. Like,
Yeah.
Hinch, T-Bell, and I've forgotten the other bloke. They all have like
Lee,
good banter.
Lee
They're
Diffie.
him.
So Lee's like the GOAT. He is just so good at putting it all together. And Hinch is just a great broadcaster. I mean, he's just down to earth. He's got time for everyone. He talks to everyone. He's brilliant. He's just a good human being. And T-Bell is great as well. His experience is second to none. And yeah, he's a top man. And I love the sort of raw nature of their broadcasting as well, where they just stick microphones in drivers' faces when they get out of the car. You don't get that in Formula One or anything else like that. When Graham Rahals just had a shocker or whatever, or whoever it is, Will Power, they just get out of the car and they're straight in there before they've even had a chance to decompress, speak to anyone. They're speaking to the world, and the reactions you get are quite good, I think, off the back of that.
Definitely. Have you ever had a particularly challenging or controversial race to commentate on, and how did you handle it?
I think the most challenging situations are when people might be hurt. I think that is, no one teaches you how to navigate these situations, and nobody, it's not like a manual that you can react to. And we're human beings as well. We're seeing it for the first time. So it's just about being respectful and being professional in those spaces. Obviously, we all set out to do that, but making sure you are you're not saying anything that is a rumor, for example. You've got to stay true to the facts. You've got to be really compassionate in that moment, and those are hard times, because no one wants to see anyone get hurt.
How different is commentating on IndyCar or F1 to commentating on something like the Olympics or rugby?
Yeah, so do you know what? It sounds silly, but the biggest challenge when I commentated on rugby for the first time was remembering that I can see everything. So it's not just the screen that I can be married to. And in motorsport, yes, we might have a view, but sometimes you don't. You look at the Formula E commentary, say for Tom Brooks, he's in a porter cabin in a TV compound away from the track, so he doesn't get to see anything. He's in a windowless porter cabin, so you don't always get to see stuff. Le Mans, for example, you can't see anything if you're commentating on site, so you're totally married to your screen and everything else that's going on in your digital environment. But when you go to commentate on a rugby match, you'll be commentating, and then you might notice that someone's injured, and then you actually start talking about that because you can see it, but you've got to be careful because the viewers can't see that. So if you forget to then go back to your screen and talk about what they can see, then it's a bit confusing for everyone at home. So just making that transition of not getting fixated on just focusing above the screens and actually bringing it back to the screens, and likewise not just being stuck in that screen for the whole game, and being able to talk about some of the things that the viewers can't see, because that does bring some color to what's going on. You know, if someone is down injured, for example, you can talk about that, and that brings some information to the broadcast that the viewers might not be able to see. But you can't. You got to remember where they are and where you need to be with your eyes. So it was kind of really interesting doing it for the first time, because I was like, oh wow, I can actually see what I'm commentating on, as opposed to not just being on tube. And then with the Olympics and stuff like that, it's just being able to not make a complete hash of all the pronunciations, because in the motorsport world we get used to the nations that predominantly compete in motorsports, and we get used to the pronunciations of those names. But in the Olympics, for example, you might go to the archery and it might be an athlete from Kazakhstan, and you know your understanding of that mother tongue and that athlete that you've never heard of in the moment getting their bronze medal is you know, you got to make sure you get it right. And so just having that broader horizon and information and knowledge base is a real challenge when it's something like the Olympics.
I think like I've done interviews before with people who I don't think have like English last names, and so I've like, you know, I've researched as much as I can to see how we can pronounce their name.
I always say though, when you're doing it, just say it the same way. Don't don't have about three different versions throughout the broadcast. So if you're going to say it wrong, say it wrong the same way every single time.
You've got to
Because
commit.
sometimes one broadcaster will say it one way, the other broadcaster will say it the other way. I always say, whatever it is, let's just align. And if it's wrong, it's wrong, you know, and we just got to go with that.
I've just thought of another question. Um,
Okay.
do you see like Sky Sports maybe sending people over to the Indy races at some point in the future, or solely relying on the US people?
Yeah, so the model that we have is obviously to simulcast now the NBC footage, but also the Fox footage in the future. So it all depends on budget and what the appetite is. So it's probably a question that's a bit above my pay grade, but it's, you know, I'm sure that these conversations happen, and predominantly it all does boil down to the budget. You know, Sky Sports F1 is predominantly an F1 channel, and it's wonderful that we've got the Indycar on there and one or two other championships as well, and you know, Festival of Speed this weekend. But the budget has to be centered around Formula One, and so I get that.
Thank you for watching this week's episode of the Avoid the Tyrewall podcast, and thank you so much, Tom, for doing this interview. See you next week. Bye.